Okay, now that we've finished simple interest, I'm going to introduce to you a new form of interest which is called the compound interest. Okay, so there's simple interest and there's compound interest. That's what we're going to be looking at now. Now, compound interest isn't that simple. Basically, it's a little bit different to how it works, how the interest is charged. Have a look at the diagram. Let's say our principal value is $100 as well, okay? Like I explained to you with the simple interest, the same principal value, and it's over a 3-year period. Now, whereas simple interest, we charge a fixed interest per period, compound interest, the interest being charged gets a little bit higher every period. Okay, so $100 is a principal and our 50% interest rate is as it is. So I charge 50% of the $100, so it becomes, our new value becomes $150, okay, because we're charging 50% interest. So $50 interest becomes added on top. So at our second period, it becomes $150. Now, for the next period, we charge 50% again, but this time it's not 50% of the principal value, it's 50% of the period prior to that period. Okay, so the previous period was $150, so we charge 50% of that one, not this one. Okay, so 150 divided by 2, or basically just times it by 50%, you should get 75% added on top of the $150 to get $225. Okay, so see how it's building up period by period? So now our new value is $225. We calculate 50% of this value, not this value, and then we add it on top of the $225 to get $337.50. So our final value at the end of the term is going to be that value there. So see how it's different to the simple interest? So we're adding on top as we go, so it gets higher and higher every period. Okay, so that's because it's a little bit more complex. Our formula gets a little bit more complex as well, but it's not going to be too bad. The formula is A equals to P times 1 plus R to the power of N. Okay, A, we say it's the total amount. Now guys, you got to know the difference between this interest and simple interest, because remember with our simple interest formula, I equals to PRN, the subject is I, which is just the interest. But with compound interest, the subject is A, which indicates total amount. What was total amount? I think I told you that total amount is principal plus interest, isn't it? So compound interest formula calculates the principal plus the interest. Okay, that's why we notify that as just A. Okay, not I. Alright, so make sure you understand that bit. Now, P is usual principal value. R, we say it's the rate, interest rate. Now, we use capital R for simple interest, but we're going to note as little r for the compound interest, just to make a difference. And little n is the number of terms. Okay, and again, I'm just going to use the lowercase just to make a difference with the simple interest. And that's pretty much it. So have a look. It will take a little more time to memorize that one, but you'll get used to it as we go. Okay, so let's move on. Let's try an example. Find the total amount. So total amount, we use the compound interest formula, right? That $10,000 is to invest for 10 years, a term deposit at 5.5% per annum, compounded annually. Okay, so we're going to use the compound interest this time. So it's pretty much the similar thing, it's just a different formula that we're using, and they give us all the necessary inputs. So I'm going to use our formula, but we're going to notify what PRN is first of all, like we do with the simple interest. P, the principal, is simply $10,000. The rate is 5.5%, but I just converted it into a decimal. And the number of terms is 10 years, so 10. And because it's compounding annually, all the period and the rate is in per annum, so we don't have to change anything. So with compound interest, you've got to keep an eye on this. Compounded annually or monthly or quarterly, you've got to keep an eye on that. Okay? Okay, so I've got that. Let's put it into our A equals to P times 1 plus R to the power of N formula. It's getting longer, so let's put it in. P is this, 1 plus R to the power of 10. Put it into your calculator. This is what you should get. Okay, so as long as you memorize the formula, it's just a matter of you using the calculator. Okay, so it's not too bad. Have a look. Let's move on. I'm going to quickly discuss the difference between simple interest and compound interest. I've already explained it a bit, but I'll just show you on a diagram. I told you that simple interest is a fixed interest that's charged per period. So the total value becomes greater very constantly, okay? So it's getting bigger, but at a very constant rate, isn't it? Whereas the compound interest, as time goes by, it increases very rapidly, okay? Because we're charging interest based upon the total amount that we had in the previous period. Whereas simple interest, we're only going to be charging that based on the principal initial value. That's why the slope becomes very different. Okay, so compound interest, very rapid increase over time, whereas simple interest is just same, steady over time. Okay, so that's the basic difference. Okay, so simple interest calculated on the principal, same value always, that's what I said. And compound interest calculated on the principal plus interest earned. Okay, so because the value is increasing over time, the interest being charged in the next period becomes much greater over time. Okay, so you must understand this difference, okay, to understand all the questions very easily. All right, so don't skip this part. Make sure you understand this fully before you move on. Okay, so let's try the next few questions. Okay, it says please fill the following table in the interest rate if the interest rate is 10% per annum. Okay, so they give us an interest rate, and let's just assume that the principal value is $1,000. They don't say here, but I'll just write that down. P is going to be $1,000. That's what we're going to be starting off initially. Okay, let's have a look at the simple interest. Simple interest charged will simply be, for the first period, the principal value times the rate. And it's just one period, so you don't have to multiply it to any period. It's just going to be multiplied by 1. So I'm just going to put 1,000 times 0.1. So in the first period, we're going to be charging $100. Okay, so it's very simple. In the next period, we're going to do the same thing. We charge 0.1 or 10% of our principal value. Remember, we always look at the principal value for simple interest. So it's basically the same. And for the final period, period 3, we do the same thing, $1,000 times the 10%, and we get $100 again. So as you can see, for simple interest, every period or every term, we have fixed interest being charged. Okay? Now let's have a look at compound interest and see how it differs. It's going to be the same for the first period. It's simply going to be $1,000 times the percent rate, which is going to be $100. But I hope most of you can tell me that for the next period, we're not going to be looking at the principal value, but the previous interest plus our principal, which makes, okay, so we've got a interest of $100. We add it to the principal to get $1,100, and then for the period 2, we charge interest upon this value. Okay, so the interest that we have is slightly higher. Okay, so this is our new interest for the second period. Now we add that to the previous principal, which becomes this value here, and then we charge interest upon that value. Okay, so times the 10%, you should get 121. Okay, so have a look at that. Can you see the difference? So that's the difference of simple interest and compound interest. Hopefully that gives you a good idea. So now we can move on to the questions that are requiring the compound interest formula. All right, let's have a look at question 13. It says find the total amount that $15,000 is to invest for 3 years, a term deposit at 5.25% per annum compounded annually. Okay, so we simply use our formula. Have a look at the formula very closely so you can memorize it as we go. Put the values in. 15,000 is P, 1 plus the rate, as a decimal, and our number of terms or periods, 3. Okay, put it in the calculator correctly, you should get something that looks like that. Okay, if it doesn't really say, always round it to 2 decimal places. And that's it. So very easy. Find the total amount that $15,000 is to invest for 3 years. Shares paying a dividend rate of 5.08% per annum. But have a look, guys, it's compounded quarterly. This is the key here. It's compounded quarterly, so every 3 months. Okay, so 4 times a year. So because it's compounded quarterly, we have to change both the rate, because the rate is in per annum, but we want the quarterly compounding. So we must change this to in terms of quarters, and we must change the years, the number of terms, to quarters as well. So we've got to change it both. We've got to change it according to this. Okay, so it's different to the simple. Now P is the principal, which is simply that one. This one hardly changes. Now the rate R is going to be our 5.08%. I just changed it into a decimal. And because it's quarterly, I'm going to divide that by 4, because there's 4 quarters in a year. So you should get this per quarter. Okay? Now N, the number of periods, is going to be, 3 years, but because we're changing it to quarters, and I said there's 4 quarters in a year, we multiply 3 with 4. And that becomes 12 quarters. So we've changed both in terms of quarters, now that we can put it into the formula. So put it into our compound interest formula. You should get principal times 1 plus the rate, the new rate that we calculated, and the new period that we calculated on the power. Just put that all into your calculator. And you should get this value here. Okay, so have a look. So the only tricky part to this one was converting the units. Okay, but it wasn't too bad after all. Let's move on. Question 15 says find the total amount that $15,000 is to invest for 3 years, a building society paying a return of 5.4% per annum, compounded monthly. Okay, so this time, keep an eye on this one, compounded monthly. So we're going to change our rate because it's in per annum, so we're going to change it to a monthly rate, and we're going to change our period to months, not years. So start off with the principal because it's not going to change. Our rate, which is 5.4%, but I just wrote it as a decimal, divided by 12 because it's 12 months in a year, so 0.0045 per month. That's the rate. That's a new rate. And N, the number of terms, is going to be 3 times 12 because it's 12 months in a year. So to calculate how many months in 3 years, we do that and get 36 months. Okay, so we've done it both in terms of months, so we can just put everything into our formula. So A equals to P times 1 plus R to the power of N. Put it all in, just like that. Just put it all in. That goes there. 36 goes on the power. And that's what you should get. Okay? Just calculate it using the calculator. And that's it. Okay, so have a look and let's move on. Question 16, find the total amount that $15,000 is to invest for 3 years, a business venture with guaranteed return of 7.3% per annum, compounded daily. And just neglect the leap years. We're just going to assume that 1 year has 365 days. Okay, and even if it doesn't mention, we usually just assume that there's 365 days. So we'll do it. And as you can see, I'm not sure if you noticed, the previous few questions and this question as well, everything is pretty much the same. The principal and the number of years actually was all the same, but the only difference was how it's compounded and the rate. So once you've seen all this, try to compare how they're different, okay? So you can get a good idea as well. Anyway, we'll try this question. Principal, same. Rate, 7.3%. As a decimal. How much is it going to be compounded? It's going to be compounded daily. So to find the daily rate, we simply divide it by how many days in a year, and then you should get this rate. Very, very small per day. Okay. Now, and the number of terms is 3 years, so how many days in 3 years? Times it by 365 to get that amount. So we've got it all, we've put it in the right units. Let's put it into our formula. Let's have a close look at the formula again and put it in. So principal, the new rate, and the new terms, new number of terms. Put it all in your calculator, be very careful, and that's what you should get. Okay, and that's the final answer. So let's go to the next question. Okay, example 7. I'm going to go to a quick example to show you a little variety of a question. John invested $20,000 at 5% per annum compound interest, with interest compounding annually. Okay, so I don't think we really need to change anything because it's all in terms of years. Now part A asks us to find the value of this investment after 10 years. Okay, so I guess our period or the number of periods is 10 years. So we want to find our value at the end of that period. Okay, which is basically just using the compound interest formula. So P is our $20,000, rate is our 5% in decimal, and N is our number of years, which is 10 years, okay? Put it into your formula, because you guys know that A represents the total value, which is the value at the end of the investment, principal plus interest, so we don't have to worry too much about this, just putting everything in the formula is what we need to do. Put the values in, calculate it, that's it. So you guys should be experts at this now. Part B, find the amount of interest earned. Okay, find the amount of interest earned. So guys, as you already know, I'm just going to keep stressing this to you. A, what is A? A is principal plus the interest that we've calculated. Okay, principal plus interest is calculated as an outcome of this formula. Okay, so if you want to find just the interest earned, we should subtract the principal, don't we? Okay, to get just the interest. So from this value includes principal plus interest. So to just get the interest, we should subtract the principal from that total amount. Okay, that's what I'm just stressing to you guys. So it will be that value that we've calculated, which is actually the total amount, minus our principal, which is $20,000, and the leftover, this part, is our interest only. Okay, so you got to really keep an eye on what the question is asking you. Alright, so not too bad. Let's try some questions. Question 17 says, John invested $150,000 at 5.2% per annum compound interest with interest compounding half yearly, so semi-annually. Now part A says find the value of this investment after 10 years. Okay, so our number of periods is 10 again. P equals to the principal value, rate is 5.2%, but I'm going to divide it by 2 because it's compounding half yearly. Okay, so you simply divide it by 2 to find the semi-annual rate, which is that one. And N, a number of periods, which is actually 10, but this is 10 years, so how many semi-years in 10 years? Just times it by 2. So we have 20 half years altogether within 10 years. Okay, so we're going to use our new rate and our new N, okay, number of periods. Put it all into your formula because it's asking us to find the value of this investment at the end, so the final value, which is just using the formula. Put your values in, put your new rate, put your new N, calculate your value into your calculator. That's what you should get. Okay, so I don't really worry about this anymore. I think you guys should be all okay with this now. Now part B, find the amount of interest. What did I say in our previous example, guys? This value is principal plus interest. So to only find the interest, what do? We subtract the principal from the total amount that we calculated. Okay, now what's our principal? That's our principal. So we subtract $150,000 from the value, from the total amount that we calculated, and that will be your interest. Okay, that's just your interest. Okay, so that was the compound interest, guys.